Faster than Anakin's first time with Padme, Andor has ended after a short but sweet 4-week run, bringing to a close what has truly been an amazing story that few could have predicted just 4 years ago when the show was announced. Season 1 was widely praised by fans and critics alike, offering a vastly different experience to the more action-packed and light-hearted adventure shows like The Mandalorian. It took us away from the Force and into the grounded reality of the day-to-day life in a galaxy ruled by the Empire at the peak of its dominance. So Season 2 had its work cut out. It had to cover 5 years worth of events to get us to Rogue One, it had to maintain a complex web of intrigue and politics, and it had to develop characters in ways that felt natural but in line with the fast pace of the story. Now, before I get into talking about the second season, I want to address a point that's been raised around the supposed arrogance of some fans and how they use Andor's excellence as a measuring stick for other Star Wars shows. Now, I understand that people have different opinions, and if you like a show that I don't, then that's fine, more power to you, but the idea that you can't want or demand other shows be as good as Andor is, in my opinion, wrong. We have every right to expect the quality of Andor in other shows. I mean, sure, not every single show needs to be the same tone as Andor. Not every show needs to have the same complex narrative as Andor, but it absolutely can have the same quality of writing and character development. And I get that different shows are aimed at different audiences, but that doesn't mean that we should expect them to be any less of an experience. Andor gets the simple things right: location shooting that makes the world feel real, logical motivations that help you understand characters, action scenes that balance tension and excitement whilst feeling natural, and story hooks that keep you wanting more are all just some of the things that Andor does perfectly, and it should be the bare minimum for every show that Lucasfilm produces. It's not arrogant to expect quality, especially when we know it's possible. However, it is arrogance to say that someone else shouldn't enjoy something just because you didn't. That's the key difference that I think is lost on a lot of people here. There's nothing wrong with enjoying a show and being able to highlight its flaws. I don't think any less of anyone who enjoys The Acolyte. Opinions are subjective, and that doesn't necessarily stop me from criticising shows and their weaknesses, especially when we see what is possible with a show like Andor. So now that we've gotten that out of the way, let's take a look at Season 2. I was a little concerned about the format of the show, mostly because I wanted the experience to last as long as possible, but also, I thought there was a risk that the big time skips could disrupt the pacing of the show. The great thing about all of the different arcs in Season 1 is that even though they're all clearly separate stories, they all flow together really smoothly. Now, thankfully, the time skips don't feel as jarring as they could. If you accept that big leaps are going to happen, such as the rebels setting up camp on Yavin off screen, then you're barely going to notice it. I do think there was a couple of things they could have tied up better. For example, the TIE Avenger. Where did that end up? It's quite an advanced piece of kit that the Rebellion could have made real good use of. Season 2 saw the majority of the surviving cast return, and everyone is given a moment to shine, and there's really good development throughout. For Cassian, his journey is that of a reluctant fief to rebel leader, and that is completed in this second season in great style. You can see just how much he's learnt from Luthen, and when he travels to Gorman to assess the rebels there, he can see just how unprepared they are, and he sniffs out the Imperial trap, but they refuse to take his advice. Bix gets a fantastic revenge arc. My fear coming into this season, and as it started to progress, was that she was going to be used as the ultimate tragic figure where there was no redemption and it was only going to be pain and suffering to show you the true horrors of living in the Empire. She's still clearly traumatized by her experiences in Season 1, and losing Brasso and being forced to leave yet another home saw her turning to drug use. She wasn't just left to fade away though, and getting her well-deserved revenge on Dr. Ghost was a very satisfying moment that was well earned. From that point on, she goes from strength to strength, and she really is one of the biggest winners out of all of the characters here. She survives the Empire, she goes home to her friends, and although she's lost Cassian, she does keep his legacy alive with their child. I don't think many of us expected Luthen to survive the second season. I certainly didn't, and I just wanted him to go out in a fitting way, and I think that's exactly what happened. You can see with each passing year for each arc, the tension starts to really wear him down as the rebellion and the pressure begins to grow and gets more complex. He starts to struggle to handle all of the pressure, but it's made very clear just how important his work is in establishing the wider rebellion. And what I really like is the presentation that both he and Saw Gerrera show the different extremes of the rebellion. Saw is just an outright lunatic. He's lost to a life of warfare. His speech to Will was an absolutely fantastic display of how leaders can get their followers to believe in their cause, even to their own detriment and expense. It was super inspiring. It was scary, and it was just a little bit crazy. Luthen is the other side of that coin. He works from the shadows, he manipulates people and events to get what he wants. He knows Gorman is a powder keg that's ready to explode, and he knows it's likely a trap, but he is willing to sacrifice that world to expose the evils of the Empire. And it's ironic that both Luthen and the Empire wanted the Gore to rebel for almost exactly the same reason, which was escalation. And by the time Dedra comes to confront him, it's already too late. As he says, the rebellion has flown away. Luthen's job is done, and he gets out on his own terms, knowing that Kleya is going to carry on, and having their backstory come at the very end of their journey was really well thought out. It lets you connect to the characters first so that you actually cared about where they came from. Now, speaking of Kleya, she is a great example of how this show builds up characters that started almost as background figures. Look at Lonnie as well. He becomes such an important figure in the whole story, despite just being a peripheral figure in the first season, and Kleya is a little bit similar. In Season 1, she appears to just be Luthen's assistant in both the shop and his efforts for the rebellion, but in the second season, she outshines Luthen. She's decisive and strong, and the intensity that she displays throughout really comes through in scenes like removing the listening device from the art gallery. By the end of the season, you can see just how much she's given of herself in the fight to the Empire. Now, Mon Mothma dominates the first arc, her desperate desire to save her daughter from a life of hardship that she herself had lived, whilst also trying to balance the pressures of the rebellion, culminates in this fantastic dance party at the wedding where she truly just has a fuck it kind of moment. And I think that most of us can relate to a time in our life where we've just kind of given up and surrendered to the moment, and just seeing her dancing in what could be perceived as euphoria, but is actually, as we all know, just her having a breakdown, was a really special moment. On the Imperial side of things, I continue to love seeing the inner workings of the fascist regime, seeing how it runs at the ground level whilst also seeing the manipulative tactics at play. Little hints from the very beginning that they've started to twist the galaxy's opinion on Gorman through propaganda that would then pave the way for their occupation a bit later down the line. And it's an effective narrative because for many of us, we can see a similar story playing out in real life, and regardless of what some may think, Star Wars has always taken inspiration from real life to mould elements of its plot. Now, Andor as a whole has made the Empire threatening. It's made them intelligent and dangerous, and that is something that has definitely been lacking in the past. Season 2 really highlighted the evil of the Empire in such an intimate way. I think I always saw the Empire as being the cool villains who you could secretly like just a little bit, but after Andor Season 2, that is definitely no longer the case. For Dedra, her story in Season 2 wasn't that different from Season 1. Her obsession with Axis is a driving point alongside her struggle to survive the ranks of the ISB. Eventually, her scheming brings about her downfall and is a great example of the fact that eventually, every fascist authoritarian regime starts to eat their own. But she's a fantastic character. I was swaying back and forth the whole season between feeling sorry for her and hating her because she's clearly intelligent, she's driven and loyal to a fault, but she's been brainwashed from a young age to believe that the Empire is the key to a peaceful society. And in the end, she learns the hard way that for the Empire, peace is a lie. Her boyfriend Cyril is another character who I enjoyed immensely in Season 1. I just love a character who is so dedicated to their beliefs, and I never really saw Cyril as evil. I just saw him as misguided and someone who wants to prove themselves worthwhile. In Season 2, he goes through a roller coaster ride, playing his part as an Imperial spy fantastically well. I never saw that as being his story this season, but it worked really well and made sense narratively because he's dating an ISB supervisor, so they absolutely would take advantage of that. His awakening to the horrors of the Empire was the icing on the cake of the Gorman story. It was another tragic element on top of the massacre. Cyril died knowing he'd fought for a system that was evil. He had to confront the fact that he had aided in the deaths of hundreds of civilians, and the man that he'd been hunting for years didn't even know who he was in the end. Another thing the show does wonderfully is giving us some very human and relatable moments, even for the bad guys. Cyril and Dedra's family meal with Edie was just great at showing why Cyril is the way he is. A lot of us can relate to overbearing family members who just make us want to lay down and pretend that the world doesn't exist. And Dedra coming in and just verbally dominating Edie was a very rewarding moment. Now, thank the Death Stars for Ben Mendelsohn as Krennic. Whereas in Rogue One, he plays the character as someone who is cracking under the ever-increasing pressure of failure. In Andor, he has the freedom to be confident and camp, and it is so great to witness. Krennic is firmly in control. He seems more assured in his position at the beginning, excited by the prospect of completing his secret energy project, and by the end you can see those cracks starting to form, and he dominates the screen for all of the right reasons every time he appears. Thankfully, we get no gratuitous cameos to distract from the story. Having a Darth Vader appear would have ruined the show in my opinion. Vader is overused and there was no reason for him to be in Andor. It would have been very easy to shoehorn him in as trailer bait, but thankfully Tony Gilroy is smarter than that. Once again, the story followed a logical trend. Events happen for reasons that make sense. The Empire needs the Calcite on Gorman. They know they can't just storm in and seize the planet, so from episode 1, they plant the seeds for an occupation. The meeting between the Imperials takes inspiration from the Wannsee meeting from Nazi Germany, where high-ranking German officials met to discuss the initial details of the Holocaust. Pan on to the next year and you have Cyril on Gorman helping to foment rebellion. This rebellion is used as an excuse by the Empire for a military occupation, and then a year later they orchestrate the Gorman Massacre. They round rioters up in a closed-off area and start shooting their own men to make it look like the rioters were the ones who shot first, and in the ensuing chaos they have justification and sympathy from the wider galaxy, who will now see the Empire's version of events and will be less open to hearing the pleas of the Gore. And the massacre played itself out so well. Everything on screen is done for a reason and it built it up in a patient way. You only realise exactly what's happening when it's too late, just as the civilians did. Seeing the Gorman rebels just getting eliminated in brutal ways just brings home how big a task it was for people to revolt against the Empire, but again, it plays into that statement that Leia makes in episode 4.
No star system will dare oppose the Emperor now.
The more you tighten your grip, Tarkin,
the more star systems will slip through your fingers.
Alongside the massacre, the show doesn't shy away from other difficult elements that come with the Empire. The widely discussed sexual assault scene between Bix and the Imperial Lieutenant in episode 3 was another disturbing moment that brought to light the realities of living as a vulnerable civilian in an authoritarian regime. Mon Mothma openly declaring genocide in the Senate at a time where the world is openly ignoring the events in Gaza was another empowering moment that made me really glad to see such big and bold steps being taken in a Star Wars show. Now, these types of moments aren't going to be comfortable for everyone, and I certainly don't think that they should be present in every single type of Star Wars show, but Andor is the perfect vehicle, and it does it in such a way that it doesn't compromise on the quality of the show in order to get us talking about real life injustices. So that's why I think all those elements tied together makes Andor as a whole a home run. It is top quality in every department. The location sets give a fantastic feel to the world. The restraint when it comes to big set pieces makes the important moments feel grander, and the undercurrents in each story arc tie together really well. The acting is fantastic. So much of the great dialogue and the great moments in the show could have been undone had we not had the right people playing these characters, but each cast member does a fantastic job of delivering a performance worthy of the praise that they are getting. Sure, this show could have easily had an extra 2 to 3 seasons to explore each year in more depth, and I'm sad that it won't happen, but by all means give me 2 seasons of excellence over 4 to 5 seasons of good to average any day of the week. Now, I hope that future shows will take inspiration from Andor. Don't be afraid to do something different. Explore where others haven't. Keep that realistic and relatable tone. And build characters with long-term storytelling in mind, and don't cheap out on your sets and your locations. For me, Star Wars as a brand, if it's going to grow, it needs new characters. It needs new locations and new ideas. You can't just keep relying on the Empire versus the Rebels, the Sith and the Jedi. Andor, whilst being a prequel of a prequel, has given us so much in the way of new stories and has shown us that even the most ordinary and mundane of people can make for captivating heroic figures if you do it correctly. And as for the fandom, appreciate the good, tolerate the bad, don't belittle others for their opinions, but never be afraid of holding other shows to standards that Andor has now set.